Before we begin, here's how to earn continuing professional education credit for attending this session. Gain valuable insights by attending the podcast, then complete the assessment test to download your certificate. To do this, follow these simple steps. Click on the link in your description to access the session. Create a free account and attend the podcast. After the podcast, take the assessment test and download your certificate. It's easy, and it's free. We highly recommend checking out our subscription. Let's get started.
When I'm listening to you and the way you explained it, I never looked at accounting that way myself, but you have totally changed my perspective about it. I mean, it's phenomenal. You're right. It affects so many facets of our lives and so many decisions, and it's not just numbers. It's much larger than that. Oh man, this is superb. I mean, like, so well put, man. So well put. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, now let's talk about T.L. Turner Group, your entrepreneurial venture. So what motivated you to start this venture?
Yeah, so I think after years of experience of looking at, the numbers and really understanding how the numbers really are there to help inform decisions, something that I looked at for a lot of, other, smaller and medium-sized businesses that they don't necessarily have access to the same, professionals or the same skill sets to do the same, but they still need to actually manage these type of things. And so when you look at from the US perspective, you have almost 50% of the businesses and the people in the country work for a medium or a small business. To where I said, if I can take the lessons that I've learned and I can take the wisdom that I gained from working with some of the world's largest companies, if I can take that wisdom and put it in a product offering and a service offering that could solve these similar types of problems for medium and small businesses, it's like that would be a great opportunity. And, so we started the firm with that perspective, and we've continued down that path of.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of your favorite podcast, We're Trying to Figure Out with Saul, where we dive into the stories and insights of industry leaders shaping the future. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Terrell Turner, a recognized leader in the accounting industry and one of CPA Practice Advisor's 40 Under 40 honoree. Terrell is not only a CPA, but also a co-founder of the Business Talk Library and the CFO of T.L. Turner Group. Terrell, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Terrell, can you start by telling us a bit about your background and how you got into the accounting profession?
Yeah, so my background started off, as probably like a lot of people, wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do something in business. And so I looked around and people said, well, if you're going to do anything in business, you need to actually understand how to read financial statements. And so I was kind of like, well, okay, all right, well, what's going to teach me that? And someone pointed me in the direction of accounting. And so I started taking some accounting courses. I realized I'm like, this stuff makes sense. I actually understand it. And that's really what started my career path down accounting. And after that, I looked at, okay, all right, now I need to find a job. Do you go find a job in business management? And very few people want to hire a college student, well, a recent graduate right into a business management role. So I was like, okay, I don't want to go that route. I didn't understand marketing enough, but again, someone said well, it'll probably be much easier for you to get a job in accounting if you start there. And so I started there. And what I just didn't know is that accounting would open up a world of opportunity years later as I continued down that path.
Yep. Yep. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, that is some completely, and I also noticed that you've been really promoting diversity and innovation within the accounting industry. So I really want to know what really inspired you to focus on that.
Yeah, so as you kind of go through so many different, aspects of what happens in a business, one of the things that I realized from the different industries that I worked in, because I started off in public accounting. From public accounting, I went into working for Fortune 500 companies. And one of the things that I recognized what made some of the companies successful was the level of innovation that these companies were actually doing when it came down to innovation with its products or innovation on how they were creating new sales opportunities or new product and service offering for their clients. And then I took a step back and I kind of looked and said, okay, all right, what is the type of environment that creates this place where all of this innovation happens? And one of the things that I started noticing is the places that were more innovative were the ones that had people who had a variety of backgrounds, a variety of perspectives. Because when I looked around the room, like in one of the organizations I was in, I was a finance person. We had an engineer who had learned engineering in India and they had moved to the US. We
Mhm.
also had some engineers who had studied in, the Midwest in the US. We also had some sales professionals who had come from South America. And all of us were able to bring our ideas and our experience and our perspective. And that's how we were able to come up with some very innovative ideas that were solving some real problems for the clients. And it allowed us to outperform some of the other competitors in the industry because we were competing with people who didn't have that variety of mindset or that variety of ideas. So we were able to get to the market in a very unique way. And that's why I started realizing like having all these different perspectives in the room can be extremely valuable when you use it in a way that solves a real problem for your clients and your potential clients.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's about how you take it, right? You know, the different perspectives. It's about how you take it. For some, it's a challenge, but for some, it's an opportunity in disguise. It's all about how you drive that energy and you bring it forward. So completely agree with you there. Absolutely. Well, you know, Tara, your journey in the accounting world has been quite remarkable. But I would definitely love, even for our audiences, to know some biggest challenges you faced early in your career. You could talk a little bit on that.
So I would say the earliest thing that you face in any type of career, and I think especially in accounting, is because you spend so much time really studying the craft and understanding accounting. You learn all of these great things in a textbook. And then when you get out into the real world, you recognize you really don't know a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I think it could be this I think it was a very big ego hit early on,
Mhm.
is recognizing that you know a lot of theory, but
Mhm.
now you need to learn how to put that theory into practice. You need
Yep.
to learn how what you learned in the textbook, how does that apply in the real world? And I
Yep.
think early on, that was a challenge because, like I said, when you're in school and you're getting good grades in school and you're mastering all these theories, and then when you're faced with a very real world situation, like the real world situation doesn't look like the textbook problem. There are some different factors in it. And so I think of really early on adapting to the practical application of accounting and finance. And I think also is you have the luxury when you're studying accounting is being around other people who understand, the fundamentals and the basics of accounting. But early on in my career, ended up spending a lot of time around people who really didn't understand the basics of accounting. And
Uh-huh.
so I had to learn how to speak their language because
Yep.
I had to be able to look at the financial information and then translate it. Because at one point, I was working with a lot of aerospace engineers, or as they would remind me, they were rocket scientists. And so having to explain to a rocket scientist what it means to capitalize costs versus expense it. Like if you're talking to an accountant, like, okay, they
Yeah.
understand it. But if you're talking to a rocket scientist, like they have no concept of what you're trying to explain. And so for me, it's like I had to learn, how do you translate this amazing technical knowledge that you have, but how do you translate it in a way that makes sense, that help this organization make better business decisions? And coming into my career, I didn't realize like initially how unprepared I was for that, but I eventually learned it and had to go to some very unconventional kind of sources to learn how to develop that craft of being able to explain complicated things in a much simpler way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm already trying to think of that conversation that, you might explain this. It's not rocket science, but technically it's rocket science for the rockets, what a rocket scientist. Oh my God, that's so funny. Well, I mean, that's so amazing, I mean, and you rightly pointed out, and I guess it's a problem that has been there in the industry forever. What you study in college and when you get into the real life, it's just so different. And, it's a challenge that everybody faces and everybody's path is different, Even I've had a different journey. But, we always come across, as you're going along, you're learning along, there comes this moment, there's this one pivotal moment that comes, and that's that thing that shaped your way forward. And okay, this is what it is. Well, have you had such, like, can you talk about a pivotal moment that shaped your professional trajectory in this industry?
Yeah, I would definitely say the biggest thing probably was when I worked for a publicly traded company and I took a role in investor relations. And it was at a time where the company had to make some major announcements that a product strategy we were using wasn't going to actually work and we needed to make a big change. Now, this was a huge deal because the company had invested over $700 million into this strategy. So we had to make an announcement to the investors and tell them that this 700 million we invested in this is not going to work like we expected it to. So
Oh
you
my.
had to think about all the pressure that we had, and then also, the stock price was going to take a dip. And when we're on this call, and I remember being on the phone with some of the Wall Street analysts, and they're just firing away questions, and they're just asking question after question, and rightfully so. And you can definitely see like the stock price was dropping, and you have people that are being concerned because now you have staff members and employees of the company are like, are we going to have to lay people off? Like, what does this mean? Are they going to have to close different factories? And you have all of this chaos going on. And in
Yeah.
the midst of all of that chaos, I was like, this is awesome. I love this because it became an opportunity for me. It's like, I understand all the business side of the problems that we're going through. I
Yeah.
understand how that translates into the numbers. So I can explain the story on the numbers. Plus, I also understood, the pain and the uncertainty that people had, to where then it gave me the opportunity to work on my communication skills of how do we start to really develop the messaging and say, hey, yes, this is a bad situation where we do have to, cut our losses with $700 million. But hey, here is the path for us to move forward. And then to be able to reassure people with that level of confidence and say, hey, here's the data and the numbers behind the strategy that we're going to use to move forward. And I had the chance to work with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company and the CFO and saying, hey, here's how I would explain how we're going to move forward so that we can, take ownership for what went wrong, but also at the same time explain, here's why we have confidence in what's going to happen next. And I think being in the middle of all that really shaped, my perspective, because at that point, accounting became more than just numbers on a page or numbers in a statement or numbers on the screen. It's like the accounting really came to life to really say is that people are really making life decisions on this. Like We had, retirement funds that were invested in our company. People
Yep.
were making their employment decisions. We also had the relationships with the suppliers, all of our relationships with customers. Like all of these people were being affected by the accounting and the financial information we were communicating. And so for me, it just helped me realize like accounting is more than just numbers and, crunching numbers in the back room. Accounting is about helping people really understand what's going on and being able to provide people with enough information so that they can make the most intelligent decisions moving forward. And so I would say that was probably a very pivotal moment for me in my career.
Wow.
Do you want to earn CPE credit? Take this course of My CPE to earn free credit. Click the link in the description to get started.
When I'm listening to you and the way you explained it, I never looked at accounting that way myself, but you have totally changed my perspective about it. I mean, it's phenomenal. You're right. It affects so many facets of our lives and so many decisions, and it's not just numbers. It's much larger than that. Oh man, this is superb. I mean, like, so well put, man. So well put. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So, now let's talk about TL Turner Group, your entrepreneurial venture. So what motivated you to start this venture?
Yeah, so I think after years of experience of looking at, the numbers and really understanding how the numbers really are there to help inform decisions, something that I looked at for a lot of, other, smaller and medium-sized businesses that they don't necessarily have access to the same, professionals or the same skill sets to do the same, but they still need to actually manage these type of things. And so when
Okay.
you look at from the US perspective, you have almost 50% of the businesses and the people in the country work for a medium or a small business. To where I said, if I can take the lessons that I've learned and I can take the wisdom that I gained from working with some of the world's largest companies, if I can take that wisdom and put it in a product offering and a service offering that could solve these similar types of problems for medium and small businesses, it's like that would be a great opportunity. And, so we started the firm with that perspective and we've continued down that path of how do we take the wisdom that we've learned from some of the world's biggest companies and solving problems from some of the biggest business problems in the world. How do we take that knowledge and then bring it to our medium size and the small businesses? And it's been an amazing journey of just seeing that unfold. And then also just the fun part now of not just being a person who knows accounting, but also having to be the CEO of the business. And now I got to figure out sales, marketing, the business development side. And I would say is that accounting really prepared me very well to be able to do all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially your perspective towards the profession. I mean, it's so different and it's so unique, so kudos to you for that. And you know, every entrepreneur that I've talked to, I always have to ask them this, that, how do you stay ahead of the industry trends and ensure that your firm remains competitive? So how do you do that?
One is always a challenge because right now things are moving faster than they probably ever have before. Because
Yeah.
I remember talking to some of the people who've been in the profession for years. And before I started my firm, I interviewed about six different, firm owners, whether they were fractional CFO or accounting firm owners. And I just asked them, like, what has the journey been like for you? How do you stay ahead on things? And someone said, oh, we go to conferences. I go to like two conferences a year. Now it's like, if you're only getting new information twice a year, you're gonna be behind. Like
Yeah.
you have to build in like it almost has to be part of your job is to learn what is new. And when you're a smaller firm, you don't have the luxury of, hey, I'm just gonna hire someone. Their job is to stay on top of what's new. It's like we're not that big to where we can afford to do that. And so one of the things that I did as a shortcut is really spend a lot more time on the marketing and the sales side of the business, because
Right.
what it did is it put me very, very close to the problems and the challenges that our clients are facing. And by being so close to the problems and the challenges that they have, it forces me to continually look for solutions to solve our clients' problems. And so as new problems pop up, it gives me the motivation to then go find, all right, what is a solution that we can use to solve this? And I think in doing that, it really gave me that curiosity. And so I started doing a podcast where I would interview other business leaders, because one is it would give me a chance to talk to other business leaders. It would give me a chance to ask them, hey, what are you finding that's new in the industry? Because I could make it a lot easier for me to learn about new things if I was constantly having conversations with other people. And I realized by getting more connected to the community and finding people who were experts at things that I was not, I could make it a lot easier by just going to them and saying, hey, what are you learning on this area? And if they said something that was new that I needed to pay attention to, I would ask, hey, how could I get some more resources on that? Even looking at things like doing more CPEs, which I am immensely grateful that companies have been putting out more CPE content, especially the content that you can get on demand,
Yep.
because I may not have had the luxury to sit down and talk to someone who was, let's say, an expert in tax credits, and I don't have the time to go learn it. But if there is a CPE that's on demand, I can get my CPE credit, plus I can learn about what are some of the top things that I need to pay attention to. And I think it's just getting smart about using the resources around you is how I learn to stay on top of things.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You have this hunger for knowledge, and plus this mindset of providing solutions to the community. You want to create that impact. Financial education and community impact. They're clearly important to you. So can what are some key financial education initiatives that you have launched? Can you talk a little bit on that?
Yeah, so the first one was starting a podcast. Now, I would say, selfishly speaking, the podcast started off more as my educational, kind of playground of just being able to talk to people who were winning in areas that I was unfamiliar with, and being able to sit down and have those conversations. And then we started to put a little bit of production quality in them, to where we're like, if we're learning from it, we can make it available to others so that they can learn from it. And so we started off with the podcast and just creating that. And then we eventually created a media company called the Business Talk Library, where we would just put out tons of content and tons of podcasts. And then we started doing things like, hey, what if we can go back to our roots of using our accounting knowledge to also help others, to where what I would do is I would pick a publicly traded company. We would
Yep.
pull up their financial statements, and we would just walk through their financial statements. So, like, if I were the CEO of this business, here are 5 things that I would do to make this
Wow.
company better. And what it did is it showed people how to use the financial information to actually make real world business decisions. And then we started doing different types of collaborations with other companies and creating content. And probably about 2 years ago, I started speaking at a lot more conferences, to where last year, I think I spoke at like 16 different conferences. This year, I think we're probably going to hit 17 different conferences. And I think also just doing more collaborations and working with more organizations to create not only video content, but also to create visual content, to where we're creating workbooks and we're creating, free resources that people can download from our website, to really help empower people to get closer to the answers that are going to solve some of the problems that they're trying to navigate through.
Absolutely, absolutely. When you talked about, taking up the financials of a company, and then, if you were the CEO, what were the top things that you would do? it brought up a very interesting video that I'd seen some time back, wherein this gentleman takes up the PDF version of the financials, puts it onto ChatGPT. Everybody knows ChatGPT. And he's like, what do you think? It's kind of like asking questions, analyze this for me and all that. And then ChatGPT is giving it. And that's when I realized that, like, technology is really transforming our accounting industry. It's phenomenal, But like, you have been in this forefront for so long and you have been doing this for so long. So I would love to hear your perspective on, what are some, are there some impactful technologies that you have adopted recently into your practice?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, I mean, AI has been huge because what AI has done is not only just, being able to analyze information, but it's also helped me to empower my staff to get better because, I mean, we have 8 staff members and not everybody has the same level of experience or the same level of understanding. But by being able to, help them kind of navigate and utilize AI, we switch from I no longer have to focus on teaching you the technical terms or the technical understanding. Now, what I spend a lot more time is I'm teaching my team how to ask questions. And
Wow.
because they can go to the AI and put the question in the AI and let the AI start doing a lot of the legwork behind the research. So now they have more options to really read through things and read through relevant information related to their questions because I realize now to be a better accountant or to be a better professional, it's not necessarily about you having all the information in your head because the technology can find the answer faster than you. But what we have to do is we have to learn how to ask the right question. And we have to learn how to connect the dots between different things. And so we leverage AI in that way. We also use, some advanced reporting tools. Like for us, we have a lot of clients that uses the QuickBooks online technology. And so we started looking at some tools. What are some tools we can use to automatically pull that data out of the QuickBooks system and pull it into spreadsheets so we can automatically create dashboards and we can also automatically create a financial presentation of the information in a way that actually addresses the concerns that our clients have. And so by just going through some of those things and really leveraging those types of technology, what it's done is it's allowed us to move away from just being in the background of trying to pull the numbers together to actually moving closer to the front line of how do we really start to increase our understanding of what's going on in the numbers, what's going on in the business, and then we can spend more time actually coming up with messaging or coming up with ways of presenting the information to our clients or to our colleagues to help them make better business decisions. And so as we start doing that, it became very helpful. And I think also from a management standpoint, we've looked at tools like practice management software where, we've looked at the practice management software as a way to really eliminate some of the manual things we were doing, but how do we get this into a practice management software that actually does a lot of the manual work we were doing of having to hire someone to chase people down about, well, is this task done? Yes or no? And it's like the practice management software can do it so much better and
Yeah.
more consistently. And
Yeah.
then it allowed, the person that was doing that, now they're freed up to do something that is actually more enjoyable and more valuable for the business and for our clients.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE's Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned practice management software and how somebody is able to get it done for you. It's reminding you, there's always this hesitance, or even in terms of any technology. I'm sure you must have also faced that when you must have, put that forward that, all right, we're going to be doing this. So what advice would you have for accountants who are hesitant to adopt new technologies?
Yeah, so I think for accountants, we tend to very much pride like our ability to understand processes and understand how things work. And so one of the things that I always encourage every accountant or accounting firm to do is sit down and actually document the process. Like just pick one of the things that you do on a consistent basis and actually document the process, because one of the things that provides people with a lot more comfort to actually utilize technology is if you can map out the process and then you can connect the dots on, okay, which steps will technology replace? Because you may not necessarily be ready for technology to take over the entire process, but maybe you can just get technology to take steps one and steps two. And then after you get comfortable with technology doing steps one and two, then maybe you add step three and step four, or maybe it just comes down to, hey, the technology is going to do step one, two, and five. You will do steps three and four. And I would say, even if you do a partial adoption, it's still going to add tremendous value. But what I have seen in my own experience is once you really map out that process and you start seeing where technology can play a role, eventually you'll get very comfortable and say, hey, how do we just get the technology to do all of this so then I can go do something else that's more valuable or more rewarding for myself, more rewarding for the business, and more rewarding for the clients or the community that I'm a part of. And so I would definitely encourage accountants, start with documenting your processes and then ask yourself, which steps can technology create more time for me by handing that step of the process over to the technology?
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. Like this is fantastic. I really love the way you put it out there. You first want to write it all down, it, because I think that's a very critical step. You got to write it all down, and then you got to identify which one you want the technology to take care of and everything. Very well put, Terrell. Thank you so much for that. Leadership and mentorship are crucial for the growth of any profession. What is your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, so I would say this is something that has evolved over time, because when I started off in my career, I wasn't, a leader. I didn't see myself as a leader. I saw myself as a recipient of someone else's leadership. But over time, I started realizing that even if I didn't have the leadership title, that I had some role in, being able to influence what was going on. And so my overall philosophy is that no matter where you are in your career or in your business or organization, you have a leadership responsibility. And part of that is to be able to set the tone for what is going to help that organization, what is going to help the people around you actually show up and be able to perform their best. And I think that's one of the fundamental things. But now, as a CEO of a firm, one of the things that I recognize is my philosophy around leadership is I need to paint a very clear picture of where we are going, what the potential looks like. And then my job is to help remove the roadblocks so that my team can live up to the potential that they're capable of.
Absolutely, absolutely. And how do you approach mentoring young professionals in the accounting field?
So when it comes down to the young professionals, I really enjoy just having a conversation with them of helping them kind of understand, like thinking through a process of what is it that you want and really making it clear and telling them that, hey, you don't have to want what someone else said you should have. It's okay for you to really clarify what is it that you want and I always remind them, even for myself, like when I came into accounting, I didn't want to be an accountant. I just wanted to work in business. Accounting just happened to be a great way for me to get started in that. And so I always help, other young professionals understand, be true to what is it that you really want. And then after we identify what you want, let's see how can accounting play a role in helping you get closer to that. Because it is very easy to get lost in starting a career and then just following the career path that someone else says you should follow. But I'm like, if that career path is not going to lead you to the destination that you want to end up at, you're not going to be happy with that, years from now. Like, that's part of the reason why I think you have some people who have really talked poorly about the accounting profession and how the accounting profession is not all that great. And I think part of it is because they had spent so much time traveling down a path that didn't lead to the destination that they wanted to end up with. So I will always start there, just clarifying what is it that you want. And then let's talk about and let's have an honest conversation about how can accounting play a role within that. And then once we have that clarified, I can help you learn whatever technical skills you want to learn, and I can help you learn the soft skills that you're going to learn. But we need to make sure that we clearly understand what is the destination that we are working towards, because everything has to work in relation to getting you from where you are to where you want to be.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can you share a memorable mentoring experience and its impact?
Yeah, so I'll start off with an example of, someone who was a good mentor to me. And it was back when I was working for, one of my first Fortune 500 companies, and I was sitting there. I went to lunch with my mentor, and I was saying about how, I wanted to be in a role where I could, make the business decisions and kind of decide what decision we were going to make in the business. And he looked at me very calmly and he said, "Hey, if that's what you want to do in this organization, you need to go back to school and become an engineer, because you're working within the engineering department. Like, the engineers are not going to look to the accountant to make an engineering decision."
Yep.
And it's one of those things that really humbled me to really help me understand. He said, "Hey, you work in finance. Here is what we do in finance. We understand the financial and the monetary implications of the decision. And then our role is to help empower the engineer to make the best operational decision. And that's the role that we play." And he told me, he said, "If you're not happy with that, then maybe this isn't the right field for you." And I think, that honest conversation allowed me to start having a more sober perspective about what my role in accounting was. And then also he put it on me. He said, "Hey, if you want to be an engineer, you want to make engineering decisions, you got to ask yourself, are you willing to go back to school to get that skill to be able to do that? If not, we need to really focus on what is your role on the team." And so I always kept that experience with me as I talk to others. Like, I speak on college campuses, and one of the students came up to me afterwards and he was like, "You know what? I never knew that there were so many opportunities that accounting could open the door for me." And I said, "Yeah, I mean, accounting can play a very functional role in a business, but it can also play a functional role in your career path or your professional path or even your entrepreneurial path." And so I've even told some people who have told me, "Hey, I really want to be an entrepreneur." And I told them, like, "Hey, maybe you should do a little bit of accounting, enough for you to understand financial statements,
Yep.
and then start investing your energy in pursuing that entrepreneurial path." Because one of the things that I've seen is entrepreneurs who have no concept of the finance side of running an organization, they tend to not be very successful. And so I do think from, those two examples really stand out to me from a mentorship received and a mentorship given perspective.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you rightly pointed out, if you don't know how the money's coming in and how it needs to be, how it's going on to the statements and how it's impacting, that could be a major challenge. Very rightly put out. But when our profession is such that it goes through that reaches a point where you're like, this is too monotonous. People, a lot of accountants go through that. How do you stay motivated and focused during such challenging times?
Yeah, so I do think that there is a element of monotone, I think, to every single career. Because after working in different organizations where I've worked in finance supporting engineers, I've worked in finance supporting the sales team, supporting the marketing team, and supporting, customer support. I worked in, finance supporting a manufacturing facility. And I've worked supporting all these different functions. And what I realize is that in every one of those fields, there is a little bit of monotony and there is a boring side to every single field. It's just that you don't really hear about the boring side of sales as often. You only hear about the exciting side of it. And so, one of the things that I tend to recognize about accounting is the boring part of accounting, yes, is there. It's not, it can't be completely eliminated. Now, the good thing is we can start to use technology to do some of the boring side so
Yep.
that we can spend a little bit more time on the exciting stuff, because I think the exciting part of accounting is what you do with the numbers after you get them. It's not putting in the journal entries. It's not, calculating a depreciation schedule. It's after you get the numbers, now, how are you going to have conversations with the people who need to make decisions? Like, how are you going to present the information? How are we going to dig in and analyze the information? Like, what other non-financial information are we going to consider so that we can understand the big picture and then deliver a message and influence how the business is going to make a decision moving forward? Now, what I do have to tell people is a lot of times we don't really hear about that in accounting as much, because a lot of times people who go into accounting, they actually go into it because they want the comfort of the monotony. They want the comfort of the routine stuff. And I've even had some conversation with some people who said, well, accounting is boring. And I was like, well, accounting is not really boring. It's just you're boring as a person. Because I was like, there's a lot of exciting things you could do. The question is, do you really want to put yourself out there and use your accounting skills in that way? Because you could analyze the numbers, and then how about you go talk to the manager, you talk to the general manager, and you explain to the general manager what you learned by analyzing the numbers. And the person was like, well, I don't really want to do that. And I'm like, you don't want to do the exciting side of accounting. And that's okay. If you just want to focus on, the safe, secure, boring side of accounting, that's fine. But I'm like, don't define the entire industry because you prefer to do the safe, boring stuff. Because I'm like, there are a lot of exciting things you can do in accounting, but you got to want to actually do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's an industry, it's all about perspective, it's all about perspective. And, the things that I've heard from you, I mean, I myself, like I said, I never looked at accounting that way, but you have completely changed my perspective towards it. But, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing these insights. Now, our industry is going through a paradigm shift, so look with the technology and all that coming in, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, it's going to replace us, and accounting being a monotonous thing, people are like, oh, maybe it will replace accountants. But I'm not of an opinion. But if I were to ask you, looking ahead, what do you see as the future trends in accounting? What would you see?
Yeah, I think the future trends in accounting is that the way technology is coming in, what technology is doing is it is eliminating the boring parts of accounting. Or let me say, it is eliminating humans being required to do the boring part of accounting. What it's doing is pushing us to have to spend more time on the things that are a little bit more exciting, like actually analyzing the numbers and then helping make a decision based off what the numbers say, or figuring out how do we present the information in a way that helps bring to light whether it's something good, something bad, or an opportunity or a risk. It's like, how do we start to use the numbers and the information? And I think what technology is doing is pushing us to have to do that more and more, to where We can't just hide behind our screens or hide at our desk or hide behind our phones or our software programs, because the software is actually doing the boring part a lot faster than we used to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
now we have to shift our perspective and say is that, hey, we have to move closer to the front line of the decision-making process, which for a lot of people, that means we're going to have to develop new skills. Like we're going to have to learn how to communicate to people who don't have an accounting background. We have to learn how to present information. We also have to learn some new computer skills. Like everything probably won't be done in Excel or spreadsheets anymore. So we have to learn some new, computer technology. And then I think one thing that a lot of accountants I feel like have very, very underestimated is we have to learn how to listen. Because a lot of times, since we were so busy into the details of the numbers and the technical side of accounting, is we kind of lost our ability to listen to the concerns of the customers, listen to the concerns of our counterparts. And when we're not actually listening, we won't know how to translate what we know into a way that they will understand it. So I think in the accounting profession, we're going to see a shift to where we need to develop a lot more of the soft skills that we've kind of taken for granted in the past, because we could always run back to the safety of our spreadsheets, or we could run back to the safety of, getting into the details of the numbers. But now that the technology is doing that a lot faster and a lot more consistent, it leaves us to say, okay, all right, now what are we going to do with our time to make sure we are adding value to the organization and to the people around us?
Absolutely, absolutely, Terrell. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey and insights with us today. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or advice for our listeners?
Yeah, I would definitely say is that now is an exciting time in the accounting profession, because it's given us the opportunity to really focus on how do we add value, because it's not necessarily about just doing the boring, the mundane. Like a lot of the things that used to scare people away from accounting, technology can actually do some of that. Now we get to actually focus on the exciting things, on how do we interact with the information and how do we communicate that to others to really impact and influence decisions. And so I'm pretty excited, because I think that now is an amazing time for the profession to really go to a next level of enjoyment for the people who are pursuing a career and a path in accounting.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Tara, for a great discussion. To our listeners, stay tuned for more episodes of your favorite podcast. We're trying to figure out with Saul. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Cheers.
Access latest and trending CPE courses with my CPE's Unlimited Access subscription. Subscribe now.